Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of What's the Deal? And today we're going to be talking about what are some of the strategies that the industries of higher education, the institutions of higher education, could be taking towards growing and developing their business. Let's go. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing? This is Lyndon Braffett, and welcome to another episode of What's the Deal? And as I said in the intro, what we're going to be doing today is that we're going to be taking a look at an industry. So I'm going to be doing something that's a little bit different as to how we go about, bringing information to the table to share with you all. What we're going to be doing is taking a look at one specific industry and the strategies that they need to be implementing that ties back into just the things of sales, marketing, customer centricity, and stuff like that. Right. So the industry that we're going to be taking a look at today is higher education, and I'm going to actually be doing it as a use case because it's something that I would have done earlier this year in terms of putting something together for a customer. So as we do this, I'll be actually having it as relevant as possible to a higher education institution. Now, why higher education, and why am I even paying attention to this? I'm looking at this for one main reason. There are many organizations that are in a state of change right now, and that state of change is affecting them in a number of ways because they are not changing. And when I say that, I mean we've really kind of exhausted the word pivot from 2020, but really and truly, we should have been pivoting a long time ago. And in terms of how do you now make sure that you adjust to the times as to what's happening with your business, it means that there are a number of strategies that should have been happening for a while because the customer environment has been changing based upon what's happening with things like the internet, all of the relevant different social platforms, based upon the structure of your organization. So, with higher education, what I'm seeing in the space of higher education in Trinidad and Tobago and by extension the Caribbean is that there are a lot, or there's a lot of demand, but there may not be a lot of conversion. Also, everyone is playing in the same space, right? And so everyone is trying to get a proper piece of the pie, but everyone is doing the same things. No one is sort of moving themselves away from just being that institution that does masters, that does degrees and stuff like that, and you're doing other skills based stuff. So we're going to be taking a look at that, and this is kind of how I like to approach business with companies that I work with or I'm proposing to work with, because again, it puts structure into the solution that I'm trying to help them develop and a sustainable way forward for them as it relates to their business. So let's take a look at what we're talking about here. So the goal is really to look at growth and leadership because that's what most organizations want to do. They want to grow and be leaders in the space. Everyone says that they want to be first, right? So one of the things that I had earlier this year is I had a conversation with a client, And they had some really aggressive goals, right? So their goals, they wanted to grow their enrollment base by about 30% to what they would have done the year before and the year before that. They also wanted to expand into different industries. Another particular objective for them was making a push into the whole SME and entrepreneurial space. One particular industry that they were looking at was, I think it was real estate. And of course, they wanted to focus on expanding within the Caribbean region and of course, increasing their international student base, right? Now, again, if I listen to that organization, I'm also hearing that same similarity in most of the other higher education institutions that I have had those conversations with. So everyone wants to grow. However, especially coming out of 2020, here are some of the challenges. Some of those challenges have actually been COVID-19, right? And coming out of COVID-19, of course, we outside of COVID-19, if we were to look at some of their past challenges, a lot of their traditional sales approaches in the higher education space was a lot of heavy advertising. So everything was an advert towards selling programs. And then beyond that, too, we also had, it was a lot of one-on-one interactions, right? The improvement, something that I noticed, so that there was a requirement to improve towards really leading the conversation in terms of career advancement. And I'll explain as to why I'm saying that moving forward. And then, of course, we want to now do proper lead to student and then, of course, to enrollee nurturing strategies. Because what happens a lot of the times is that if someone decides that they are going to hold off from becoming a student this year for whatever reason, then we don't always, or there's no strategy in place to follow up with that person thereafter. So what is it that we looked at? Well, one of the first things that we looked at is that we looked at the customer's current state. So we have, this is in their environment. The customer was actually coming out of the Caribbean region. And I have them grayed out because I don't want to just put their name in out there. But they were actually third. So that large red circle really represents the client. So we saw that they were third in the entire growth quadrant. And this is specific to marketing traffic coming out of their websites through all of the respective domains that fall into the higher education space. So in terms of their entire, competitive base, the landscape showed that they were third and they were leading on the side in terms of becoming leaders. If you look on the far right, you're seeing there in green, we saw that University of the West Indies, they were kind of being established players and yes, leaders. So they were there on the far right. But then they also had another institution by the name of UTech that they were in that leading space as well. And of course, the customer was right third behind them. From there, the other thing that we looked at is that when we looked at the entire market size, and again, we must pay attention to what is the size of your market in terms of traffic. So how many visitors are all of these domains generating? We saw that the client, was actually doing just about 284,000 in terms of traffic, right? And that traffic, actually represented their existing leads. So on a monthly basis, between that particular time frame, right, their 11.3% really made up 284,000 in terms of traffic and visitors. What we were not very familiar with is that how was that traffic converting into actual leads, and how are those leads converting into actual revenue? Now, keep in mind, there is demand for higher education. But with that demand, as we were saying here, they are in a very competitive landscape. So yes, while they're third, look at all of the other players that potential students, both mature and young students, look at all of the potential spaces that they need to play in, right? Now, what is going to happen there is, of course, you may have a lot of traffic with people asking for additional information, downloading particular things, visiting a site and look at programs, but are you converting? Right, so this is one of the things that we decided to bring up to them to kind of relay the point that a change needs to happen in terms of how they are actually going about reaching out to their customers or making a strong push towards differentiating themselves in the space. Right, so we also looked at market traffic. So this one particular site, so now when we looked at the customers' traffic, The overall market traffic was 2.5 million in terms of visitors and traffic and everything else out of the entire domain. We then identify that if it is that, okay, out of that, their 11% quantifies to 284,000. So now we're saying, so now that we understand the market size, now we are saying that if this organization wants to grow by at least 5%, then we're going to now be adding onto that 284,000. How do they now increase their volume to 184,000, right? To now make it 409,000. Now here's the thing with this. Let me just come back in frame to lay this out a little bit. The reason why I would always be not cautious with making an approach like this is because of one main reason. I don't know as to how well are they even converting on that initial 284. So if you're already doing a good job in attracting 284,000 in terms of leads or bringing visitors in, then the goal should really be along the lines of now identifying, well, out of that 284, how much of that is converted into actual leads, and then how many of those leads have actually converted into actual enrolled students. So as a consultant, one of the things that we really like to try to do is break down these things. Right now, they didn't have that official data because some of this information was the first time that they were actually seeing it. But again, this is where we need to start. We must, of course, have a start point to now kind of build on the case as to how do we actually move forward from there. All right. So if it is that we want to add that, then now let's look at what are their existing strategies. Now they would have achieved that 284,000 in terms of traffic based upon the type of marketing that they're doing. And while they're doing a lot of marketing, when we did pull up on the data, and shout out to our partner Karen Rose, who helped us really collate and fine tune some of this data, we saw that a lot of their marketing was branded marketing. Branded marketing, meaning that everything had their name in it. So that's, let's say for instance, this is SBCS this, or Eurotech that, or the UCC this. So everything was a promotional type form of marketing. Now again, I am coming from the concept of sales enablement. So I'm looking at how do we go about properly adjusting the way that we sell. And even I myself, I become very wary when every time that somebody has to say something to me, if they have to always mention that brand in it. Because again, I don't know how genuine it is. And in many instances too, here's the other part of it. You're seeing branded versus non-branded. So a large percentage of their outreach has been branded. A lot of their traffic is only 8% that's non-branded. And we don't know how well that branded traffic is. So consider branded traffic to be paid advertising, right? So where they're boosting stuff on social media, they may be making some paid stuff in certain areas. And the thing is this: while paid ads are good, it comes at a cost. There's a cost of acquisition. You know, we always say that the to get a customer is more expensive sometimes than keeping a customer. This is in one of those areas, right? And plus, the ads don't always represent what students might actually be looking for, because no one is Googling a degree by your school. People are maybe Googling something as to what, how, where, why. Those are the things that how they would normally start off Googling anything or putting in that direct search, and hopefully it takes you back directly to their school. So how do we support that type of growth? So what should they be doing as an organization, or what should higher education institutions be doing? Because many of them do have that approach. Exactly what I shared there is normally the standard approach for everyone in terms of how they go about doing their sales and their marketing. Everything is branded, they're always promoting a program, that type of stuff. So how do they actually go about changing that? Well, one of the ways, or the way that we really like to pay attention to how should that change, is by looking at a methodology called attract, engage, commit, measure. An attract, engage, commit, measure, especially the first three, really works on inbound. Developing an inbound methodology within your business where, one, you are identifying how do you go about attracting the students based upon what their goals and aspirations are. Because no one is going to say, no one is leaving an institution looking for a program to say, well, I just one of my goals is to do a degree in SBCS, or one of my goal is to do a degree in CTAL or have my master's by this institution. Their goal is that they want to get the master's, and that master's ties into something. So one of the first things that we had to do is really understand what is the alignment between what your goals are, what their customers or students, potential students' goals are, and what they are offering. So taking a look at the value proposition, and we recognize that the value proposition really was not anywhere on their website. The value proposition was actually in one of their video messages. And if we notice from what is it that they said here in their VP, their value proposition says, we help secondary school graduates and mid-level professionals for entry or upward mobility in the world of business and industry. Right? So right within their this particular statement, we recognize that they were trying to identify, or they were saying that they were working with secondary school and mid-level professionals, and that is normal because again, you have people who would have entered into school and already started entered into work and already started that working profession, but they want to do things in terms of advance, get their masters, get their degrees and stuff. Get their degrees, get their masters, doctorates, etc. while employed. And of course, you have those that's coming fresh out of school where mommy and daddy could still afford to send them and stuff like that. They don't have to push them straight into the working world, towards preparing them for a degree or master's that suits their goal. Now, notice I would have said that a couple of times in terms of what their goals are. All right, so the next thing that we had to do was really, and this is where when anything that I'm working with a client, helping a customer identify their customer's journey map. So everyone that's doing business, every customer has a journey map. And when it comes to students, there's a student enrollment journey map for higher education. As I was saying from before, the people that we are trying to reach out to, they have their own goals, but they go through a process in terms of what we will call a buyer's journey. But what we did in this instance is that we kind of broke it down into something a little bit more fine-tuned that makes sense and that's relatable to the customer. And one of the first things that every student or every mature entry-level professional has a particular goal and aspiration. And once they've made up their mind that they want to, or they are ready to start pursuing or furthering their education, they then start searching around. What will be that profession? Excuse me, that's one. The other thing would, who will be the facility? Who will be the school that's going to help me get to that point? From there, they start making particular things like comparisons. And coming out of those comparisons, once they've evaluated that comparison to say, well, okay, these schools have checked off my list, right? If there's more information that they actually need, from there is where they will now start reaching out and making the contact. Now, keep this in mind, right? If you notice, the first two stages, this decision is already made up by the customer. They've already fine-tuned. They may have started off with 5 schools as an option and narrowed it down to 2, and then they make a phone call. Plus, we don't know who else are the other influencers externally that's kind of guiding them to say, well, maybe you should try this school or try that school. Or sometimes just because mommy or daddy went to a particular school, they are automatically enrolled there, right? So when a customer reaches out to you, it's important to know that in a large percentage of the time, their mind is partially or already made up that this is either where they want to go, or they are 80% sure that this is what they want to do. All right. The other one is going to be along the lines of, from there, they will then do things like submitting their application. Now, if I were to just go back on that step that speaks about contact, your first 2 steps really speaks on how well your marketing is, because again, if we had to look at the current situation of COVID-19, but really and truly what has always been happening pre-COVID is that a lot of customers start their journey online first. They start doing the research, they speak to different people, they get as much information, and then they reach out. When they do reach out now, how do we now train your team to now engage your customers, ask them the right questions in the right way so that you can work towards getting a commitment from them? Because beyond here is the application process. And then keep in mind too that sometimes people may apply to more than one institution. So even though they've narrowed you down to the 1 or 2 or 3 schools, they're applying to each one because they may want to understand price, or if it is that they would actually get approved and stuff like that. So those things are factors. So how do you know that even so as much as you would have done a great job in terms of being in the shortlist, how do you now come out on top of the shortlist? And this is where now that administrative team, that marketing team, sales team, if they do have one, if you do have one, that sales team really has to find ways of engaging. But again, it starts from the beginning in terms of connecting your school's mission, vision, and value proposition to your people's aspirations. From there, of course, you see that they would have officially been enrolled, and then after they've actually been after they've graduated, again, the goal isn't to say that I did this thing at your institution. The goal is really now to say, well, I have that master's, I have that degree, and now that translates into what their vision and mission is, which is car, house, more income, lifestyle, etc., etc. All right. So this is one of the main areas. That's why you find me, paying some attention to this here, because one of the biggest shifts in our consultation is really to help people understand you need to change the way that you position yourself, because it has to be aligned to your students' enrollment journey. And if you could align yourself towards the goals and aspirations of the institute, of the individual, then you have a better chance of connecting to creating messages that's best suited for them. Right. So the other thing that we like to do is really now work towards putting together simple profiles. So we created a persona, right? And here's a persona for a guy by the name of Nathaniel, right? And Nathaniel is young, right? Nathaniel is a young guy, 16 years of age. His goals are achieving a CXE, so he's now looking at leaving secondary school to move into something else, right? Finding a school to support his goals, having fun with his friends and stuff like that. But again, if you understand is that he wants to move on in terms of creating his own business, right? So he has some challenges though, and his challenges are going to be along the lines of cost, finding a program to actually meet his needs, and of course working on how that goes about in terms of him attending the school. Now, what should the school do with something like this, with a profile like this? And these are profiles that we help customers create, right? So by creating this profile, you now have a baseline as it relates to how do you now want to create your marketing content. So this is where your content marketing now kicks in, right? To now start speaking to Nathaniel, right? Or if Nathaniel is doing the work, remember that Nathaniel may not be the person funding his education. So now Nathaniel could do some of the work, but then he has to take it over to mommy and daddy, right? Or just maybe mommy alone, or maybe daddy alone, that type of thing. So again, institutions need to really focus on how do they change their messaging to speak to these particular personas. Here's another one, right? Actually, before I go to that persona, let's pay attention to this now. Now, because we use Hubspot, and Hubspot is a big part of how we try to provide services, our overall service to our customers, this is an example as to what that journey should look like, providing that you're using the right tools to map your journey. Now, this isn't Nathaniel's journey, but we spoke about Nathaniel doing the right things or having those particular goals. But this is an example as to how this could actually work for an institution. So here's someone that would have visited the website. If we're starting from the top left-hand side, and the person would have visited their website through some sort of keyword search, right? And more than likely, they may not have just put the direct school's name in there, but they have come to the school over a number of times. And what they would have done is that they would have had 5 website visits, but also visited 46 pages on your site. Right from there, so our CRM, so HubSpot is actually picking up for us this information, and then now we're having a better appreciation as to what that journey is like. So this person would have now gone through so many different pages. Now, anyone who's visiting 46 pages on your website is definitely looking for something. So how now do you take that information or take this data and translate this data into an engagement with your customer? Right? And that engagement with the customer should now mean for you, that when you are asking Nathaniel specific questions, these questions will be based around what you would have seen Nathaniel do. So it's based upon his journey and his visit. Because again, Nathaniel is one of those people who's a visitor on the site, but he hasn't really converted as yet. And if it is that you guys can see what's at the bottom on the far left-hand side, you would have seen that someone may have left a message in there, and they said that I'm interested in enrolling my son in X program. So this was mommy or daddy, right, doing the actual research because they want to get their kids in, or their child into this particular school, right? So apart from changing the structure in terms of how you use how you are aligning your value proposition to speak to the needs and the goals and aspirations of your customers or your potential customers, right? The other part is now having an infrastructure, having a tool like this with being HubSpot to now capture that information. And the reason why I like to do it like this is because of the fact that the customer was actually able to leave something, and it just resonates everything that I just said. Right now, if you don't have a tool like this, then you're not going to be able to understand the journey of your customer. And basically, what I just walked you all through there is a journey. Let's take a look at another one. This is Alicia, right? And Alicia is 35, and she's been working with an organization for a number of years. But what Alicia wants to do is that she wants to grow, right? So she has her goal is becoming a senior HR professional, right? And her interests are along the line of finding a program that supports her towards achieving that, right? Her influences are her family and her son, and also her work colleagues. But she has some concerns on how she wants to go about balancing work, education, life, and then, of course, the other things along the lines of cost and education. Now, by looking at this, if Alicia is online looking for something, if an organization, and let me just come back into frame as I do this. If an organization is only promoting themselves and they're not adopting an inbound methodology by answering questions that may be concerns to customers, then you're not going to be positioning yourself as a leader. You're not going to be building trust. So your content marketing strategy, specifically for inbound, has to speak to what Alicia is concerned with, right? Who is she? So it actually means that organizations, higher education institutions, should really be doing a lot more written content, apart from just video content, but also doing written content that speaks to, because how can people balance? So you can write articles along the lines of balancing study and work, balancing home, and how to go about studying. Or you can talk about you can write articles or have particular videos that speak on how your programs or your institution structures the programs and the timetables to suit the needs of people like Alicia. So understand again, the approach to how you are doing your marketing has changed. And that is what I always say, that's what sales needs. Sales, we don't need more brochures and PDFs and stuff like that. We need more creative, customer focused content that speaks to the needs and aspirations of our customers, so that we have the ability now of engaging them at a particular stage in their journey, so that we can just help them convert and make the decision. Because we don't want to sell them, we want to help them make the decision that yes, going to school, furthering education is one of the best investments you can ever make about yourself. And here's why we want to help you do that, because we have these things. Check out this particular area of our site, because you're there building trust at a really early stage. So I want to show you something else. So this is the look of a mature person, or someone looking at doing a particular program. And again, the journey is very similar, right? So this is a mid-level professional, a mature professional. And this person would have gone through, if we look at the top row, left-hand side again, they came through a keyword search. And a keyword search, again, does not necessarily have to mean they typed in your name, because that will be direct, all right? And then from there, they peruse the site. Now, if you've all seen that this person came as a secretary, so that's another profile that you get the ability to pay attention to, because you're moving people from one stage and you're carrying them to another. They visited the website 4 times between February and March, if you look to the bottom left-hand side, and then they did 70 visits. Now, this is amazing, right? Because here again, you have someone that is so engaged in your site that out of 4 visits, they visited 70 pages. Now, again, do you have tools that's going to help you understand the journey and the needs of your customers, your visitors? And if you do have them, how are you using it to better leverage and engage and have more meaningful conversations when it's time to do this? Now, if you notice on the far right, the person left some information that is there. But what's interesting though is that this person is not from Trinidad and Tobago. This person is actually coming out of Grenada, if I'm saying that flag correctly, right? And they're asking particular questions as to when it starts. So this is definitely an online learning opportunity, right? Because their goal is to do it. Their goal is to do it online. But at the end of the day, guys, I'm showing this to show that that journey, that student enrollment journey that we spoke about, based upon who those personas are, these are actual people. So as much as we created a fictitious profile or persona, these are some actual scenarios where people are actually visiting. And if you look at all of the things that they would have visited in the beginning, so they looked at how to apply, so we're seeing here which pages that they visited, we can now ascertain as to how serious this person is as it relates to coming to our institution. Right? So the data is extremely important when we are doing this. So I want to explain this here a little bit. And this really looks at persona patterns by generation, right? And again, too, this also speaks to what marketers should be doing, how your sales team or administrative team, anyone that's engaging with the audience, how they should really understand something like this. So what we did is that we developed a matrix that speaks on the different personas based upon where they are, their generation, in terms of their age, and where they would be in their career standpoint. So if it is that we're looking at anyone that's within this space, right, we're seeing that, they are in their mature entry or they're retired. But what if someone is retired, or what if someone has the experience like myself, right? I'm in that. I wouldn't tell you what bracket I'm in. I'm a Gen Xer. Let me just say it like that. But I also have a daughter. All right, I have a daughter, and she is looking at moving into the higher education space. Right. So I have some influence. So it means that if in your content marketing strategies, and also for when your sales team is engaging with the respective individual that's contacting you via email or otherwise, how are you understanding this matrix? Do you have a matrix like this so that you will be able to better understand, okay, if it is that we have someone who is a Gen Xer, then they may be a student, they may be a parent to someone who's in Gen Z, or the same thing for someone who might be in Gen Y. At the end of the day, guys, it's important for us to understand this, because if you look at down to the bottom, where are these different generations getting their information from? Where should my school be putting a lot of its emphasis as it relates to marketing strategies and stuff like that, right? Because again, as we know, we have all of the TikToks and everything else. So all of those things now are just as important. And tying into what I just shared there, we have this, right? Now, this actually shows the persona patterns by generation. And if we look at the demographics, we are actually seeing that the 45-year-olds, we had a lot of visits from those folks in terms of male and female, right? And Facebook was one of the biggest ones as a 45, right? Sorry, at 45 years of age. And then between 18 to 24, right, we also have a lot of traffic coming from folks within that particular category. And Facebook carries the biggest traction, the biggest traffic. So again, where do you now that you have the data, where do you want to point your strategic marketing campaigns? So we're seeing Facebook being one of them, TikTok being another one that carries just around, or Instagram being the third one. YouTube, look how big YouTube is. YouTube is just around 2,800, right? So do you have a strategy? Do you have a content marketing strategy on YouTube as well? Again, these are all the things that you have to consider, because guess what? The data is showing where the customers are, right? Or where they're coming to you from. And how are these things pointing back? Now, remember initially what I was saying, that the goals of this organization was to grow a little bit more in the Eastern Caribbean and also to grow internationally, right? So this is their international demographic. And it's saying here that a large percentage of their international demographic is coming from Facebook, but it's also the other large piece is also coming from Instagram, right? And when we look at the age groups again, the age groups are 45 to 54 first, then 18 to 24 second, and then 25 to 34 third, right? So, and not so much so international, right? So they are coming from Facebook, from Instagram to their website. So again, once you understand once you understand what the data is showing you, how are you now instructing your digital marketing team, your marketing team to make certain adjustments? How are you adjusting your content marketing, right? To start speaking to certain things based upon the programs you're offering. Because guess what? As I said before, people are not just looking to this to say that they come into your university or school. They're looking at this to come for their own specific goals. Right now, when we paid attention to this client's social media profile, we did see that they were making one of the big missteps here, which everything was all promotional, promotional, promotional. But an example that we gave, that if you were to change your strategy, right, and this is what you're seeing on the right here, is how we would have been able to use HubSpot in a previous engagement for ourselves actually. And HubSpot was actually able to identify, excuse me, and again, this is being specific in terms of your content marketing strategies and what information you want to get from your customer, right? To bring leads in, and you now get the ability to understand the leads are coming in at a specific level. So a CEO is going to be coming in from the standpoint of higher entry, and of course he would have come through LinkedIn. So notice when you put, so look at where the arrows are pointing, right? So when people are filling out your forms based upon the marketing that you've done and strategically in certain profiles, how are you now using your CRM platform? In this instance, we use HubSpot to help us get that information as to where it's coming from. So this CEO came from LinkedIn. This CSR came from Instagram, and it makes sense, right? A CEO will be sitting on that professional platform. A CSR, they're much younger. So they're coming through Instagram because they're younger. The Instagram is their thing. That's the thing now, based upon, I think that might be the Gen Z or the Gen Y generation, right? So again, once you understand those things, it means that you can now adjust your content to speak to show up in strategic ways and say certain things, and then bring those leads back to your back to your website and bring them into your CRM, right? Another thing that we like to encourage customers to pay attention to is nurturing strategies. Now, I would have highlighted this in the beginning. Now, a nurturing strategy is one where, let me give you an example. Nurturing strategy would be one like this. Customer says, I am not too interested in this right now, or I may want to, let me come back at this at a later date. Let me come back in this in January. In most instances, we leave the customer to their own devices. We use no nurturing strategies to the customer. And a nurturing strategy within your organization, whether you're sales, marketing, your administrative staff, and you're supporting both sales and marketing, we need to have a strategy that's in place. So there's another matrix that we actually put together that shows what you should be doing. And we kind of broke it up in terms of being people who are very sure at what they want to do, or undecided, they're not too sure, they're a little bit on the fence, whether it's now or whether it's your institution, etc., or they're totally unwilling. So if I had to break this down, right, people who are 100% sure, your nurturing strategy should be one where you want to help them now move that forward. So customer success videos or customer success things that's on your website, because again, you want to get them to fast track and confirm that they made the best decision by choosing your institution. Folks who are undecided, you can now nurture them by giving them blogs. Whether it's now is not the right time, they're not sure if this is the program for them, etc., etc. You can use blogs, webinars, and one-to-one videos, and you can use some additional things. You can even use case studies, whatever it is, right? Once the case study is structured properly, to speak to people who are undecided, because the goal is to help them make the final decision, correct? And those who are unwilling. Well, let me just focus on this a little bit, right? When it comes to speaking to folks who are unwilling, in many instances, we might look at that as a loss. But unless they have unsubscribed, unless they say, do not reach out to me again, then more than likely, they are still customers. They are still potentials. And here's how they can actually help you. They may not be willing to attend your school, but for them, they may not be able to do it, but they may know someone who your services or your programs best suit. So they may say, I checked out XYZ institution, and I didn't find it was a good fit for me. However, I think you may do well at that institution. So they can make recommendations in your behalf, but you have to keep nurturing them during the course of the year consistently. and with things that is relevant to them. And again, this all now comes back to where are you showing up, because wherever they are is where you need to be, right? So however they became a lead to you in the first place is where you need to keep showing up. Or if it is that you are using email marketing campaigns, how are you asking them for specific things along the lines of their preferences of information as to what they will want? Excuse me. Because times change, and over time they could eventually become, and it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years, but if you've been nurturing this person for that amount of time, they could eventually convert, or they, based upon their generation, they may eventually just send their son or daughter, niece or nephew to your institution. So always having a strategy for all phases is important, right? So here's just a little example as it relates to when folks are searching, and this was done specifically for Jamaica, right? So we looked at what are some of the degrees that the institution was actually offering, and then we looked at what people are actually asking for. So when it comes to now, so you may say, well, then how do we even go about creating that content? Like, how do we now start structuring stuff along those lines? How do we change that in relation to what our sales team should be talking about? Well, the first thing that we should really look at doing is really understanding where or what people are asking for, right? And we saw that people were asking for particular things like um, a BSc in construction site management. So they were looking for things like degrees and certificates. But if you look on the far right hand side, that has the single block alone, it says how much do construction site managers make. So if you had to create content that speaks to that, then this is what you use. This is the approach that you take towards writing to that, right? Another one, another one would be as it relates to, let's say, fitness management, because this again was one of the programs that they were offering. If we look onto the far right hand side, right, because in the middle just speaks on what, right? So people will say, well, what is sports and fitness management? So that is what your content should speak to. If people say what is health and fitness management, again, that is what your content should speak to. Because again, remember I said you might be offering the fitness management program, but people are not googling your institution for fitness management. They are trying to find out how does this fitness management thing suit me. And if you look on the far right, you're seeing how much, excuse me, how much do gym managers get paid? How much do fitness managers make? How much does fitness managers pay? So people are looking for income, lifestyle. Remember, as I said before, if you're looking at the journey, this definitely speaks to exactly what I was talking about in terms of the journey. People are coming to your institution to get to earn an income, sorry, to achieve a particular goal, because getting that certificate, diploma, degree, master's sets them up to achieve something that they have out there for themselves in the long run, right? And again, one of the goals that the customer had was really now looking at how do they go about attracting students internationally, right, or regionally and internationally. And again, I like using this example because HubSpot has a really cool feature. And again, this is the power of technology, right? So, and then too many people are not into technology or not using technology well enough to sort of leverage their growth. And this is something as simple as having HubSpot connected to your site and then just paying attention to who are the people visiting and where they're visiting from. So we have all of these institutions that would have visited a customer site: Antigua, Barbuda, well, Trinidad and Tobago will be home, St. Lucia, excuse me, and you will get an understanding as to what some of the respective industries are. Now, again, if you have this information, if you have the name of the institution, how can you now strategically use your sales team? How can you use your marketing team to now approach some of these institutions? We're not going to say, hey, well, I saw that you were on my website. No, you want to say, hey, we have something that you may be interested in, because what I'm not showing you here is how HubSpot helps you see what page they may have entered from, or what is it that they may have actually looked at. That's why it says preview. And if you have some of that information, then again, you could fine tune that approach towards reaching out to that specific institution or company to start building on those relationships, right? So again, it's all a matter of a strategy for inbound, right? This here was just really me using an example of some work that I did with UWI Tech in 2020 at the heart of of um, of the pandemic, and we were able to help them successfully attain their registration scores, their admission targets in that particular period. But what did we do? We started off by implementing the CRM. So just by structuring the approach to how Eurotech went about doing things traditionally, from having an unstructured approach. They did a lot of Excel. A lot of the calls were kind of done based upon memory or what was written down in a book. But we put all of that into a CRM, kind of developed it into a sales process. Genevieve and her team, they went ahead and they actually put together a team specific to what just making certain things along the lines of phone calls or engaging with customers based upon the things that they saw that was happening within the customer's journey within HubSpot, and that really helped them convert some of those customers to enroll students. And again, this is the reason why I'm saying is phase one, because the other phase that we really want to start working on is now fully adopting an inbound methodology, right, into that organization. But I'm sharing this to say that because the higher education institution has so much demand in it, right, this framework works best for higher education. And I mean, I'm openly sharing this matrix with you all. It's something, again, that I said I put together, I developed, because it breaks down the stages of the customer journey to the top. Then it breaks down the sales stages of the organization to the second row. Then it highlights which departments are responsible, which departments should be involved, and then what are the sales and marketing strategies at each stage, right, of the customer's journey and the sales process. And then, of course, down here, we just have the platforms that people could use to really put some of their stuff out there and represent themselves and their customers and nurture and feed their customers information in the best way. And what, it's interesting because this approach, what I've actually found is this approach is actually one of the more scalable approaches that institutions could take towards starting to make changes in their business. Because here's what organizations would do, right? They would take an approach that's not always scalable. They may do things like invest in training. There's nothing wrong with investing in training, but training may not be the starting point that you need to do. You may need to start structuring your entire sales or marketing approach. That's one. You may hire more staff to deal with a higher workload. But you see, those things are not scalable because it starts off with cost initially. But if it is that you are implementing or changing the strategy to say, okay, let's just first pay attention to where the customers are coming from, and then building a strategy in place, and then we will know who we need and how much we need to help support us. That is what you will call being scalable. Because what Roytech was able to do was just adjust some of the job functions of the staff. They just adjusted, okay, this is what we need for you to do now. Whether it was periodic or maybe this was the overall change. And that's where people were just now focused on these things. And that is where they were able to get their results from. Yeah. So, I mean, as I say, me sharing this with you all is just really me taking a deep dive into higher education. When I am speaking to higher education institutions, this is where my mind is at. These are the things that I'm paying attention to, because of the fact that the solution isn't always just that one thing of training or bringing in more marketing things or doing more marketing ads. You just really know, how is your approach, what tools, resources, what is your strategy, what is your content strategy. And again, I mean, I'm old school, so I came from the space of where a lot of what I did was sales. But over time, what I did recognize that sometimes pushing the sales team towards trying to sell more isn't always the answer, because you may have a broken process or you may have an outdated process. But creating the right process structure and aligning that process structure towards your customer is sometimes maybe a better way to start, because once you do those type of assessments, you get to really realize how ready are you for something like sales enablement, how ready are you for CRM, how ready are you in general to really make change, and what adjustments. Now, is this a short-term or long-term thing? In some instances, it could be short, but it's short incremental stages towards getting it to where you need to be as it relates to things like world class. Because too many instances, because we don't have proper process and structure in place, a lot of the work that we do is ad hoc. Some things fall on the wayside. Customers fall on the wayside. Customers falling on the wayside means revenue. If if revenue loss. Sometimes too we're not nurturing customers after they've become students, so they don't have a good experience with us. So they don't make any additional recommendations because we have not delighted them well enough from a customer success or from a student success standpoint to help them to where they need to be so that they themselves can now become advocates of your brand. Advocates of your brand they're also very good for revenue generation. Attract, engage, commit, measure, guys. There's 4 steps that we work on helping customers change. It starts off with what your current approach is. We take a deep dive in terms of identifying if it is that you need to do more outbound or inbound work, and then what do the teams look like? How do the teams work together? What is your content strategy? What resources does your sales team need towards being more effective in the field? Excuse me. What tools and technologies are you using now in 2021 to help you get to where you need to be? And then also within there, how are you nurturing your existing customers, even the ones who said, I don't think I want to do any business with you, right? Or I'm not sure if I want to do business with you right now. And then at the end of it, even the customers who've signed on with you and they're now part of your family, how are you now onboarding them, delighting them, and then just totally carrying them forward, to where they need to be, making sure that we did give you the value as advertised, and then now just really making sure that they're willing to kind of speak your name, to say, well, I did this through, this particular institution. So I'm part of that Roy Tech, UCC, SBCS, BMB University, whatever it is. So again, I hope that this was valuable information to you. As I say, I like to just break down all of the different steps. And I think from the space of higher education, because you guys have so much demand, that demand needs to be converted and channeled into a different way. Because you could be doing more work and not getting the type of return that you're looking for. More work and not getting the return, and that's it right there. So thanks. That's the end of the broadcast for today. The next episode of What's the Deal is going to be next week. But in between there, stay plugged in, and we'll be talking a little bit more about different things in terms of lines of sales, marketing, and customer success strategies. All right. Peace, guys. Take care.